Hey everyone, this is James Wilson with MTB Strength Training Systems, and welcome back for more mountain bike specific training advice to help you improve your performance and have more fun on the trail. Remember, you can check me out at bikejames.com, where you can sign up for the newsletter to stay up to date with the latest training tips, as well as check out my range of training programs that I've created to help you improve your experience on your bike. So, in this episode, what we're going to talk about is what is an off season. So this came up. I posted a post on a scientific study that was done that looked at what is the best type of strength training to do for mountain biking. And so one of the comments that someone made is that, well, this must be for people that have an off season, right? Because it looked at what the riders had different types of strength training that they did in the off season, and then different strategies that they used during the riding season. And it showed that the riders who focused on building strength, so using higher loads and lower reps, had better results than riders that focused on lighter weight and higher reps. And then the riders that continued to do at least one strength training session a week maintained and even saw some small improvements in some areas compared to riders who just stopped strength training completely during the riding season. And so again, the study hinged on there being an off season and an in season. And so again, one of the comments was, well, what do you do if you don't have a quote unquote off season? So this question comes up because for a lot of riders, an off season is forced on them by the local riding conditions. This is why we think of this as the off season, because you're not able to ride, or you're not able to ride nearly as much, or the quality of riding isn't the same as during the warmer riding season and when the weather's better and the trail conditions are better. But you do have riders where this definition starts to get blurry because they either live somewhere where they're not forced off the trail, where they can ride year round, or they start to find ways around that and they use other riding gear or riding strategies to help them in less than ideal weather. So think about like fat bike riding in the snow, or some of the advances that we've had in inclement weather riding gear that allows you to get out and ride in colder weather and less than ideal weather conditions, or switching over to something like road riding, but just finding some way to continue to ride during the quote unquote off season. And so for riders that fall into one of these two categories, that they're able to continue to ride quite a bit all year round. Well, what does this term off season mean? And so, it has to take a little bit of a different definition for them, because they aren't necessarily being forced off the trail as much as they're wanting to take a little bit different strategy. So first off, there are benefits to taking an off season. So that's kind of the question number one, is like, should you even worry about it, right? If you can just ride year round, is there any reason to have some sort of off season? And the answer is yes, there are advantages to taking an off season. So one, you can address weaknesses in your strength or general conditioning that can be holding back your overall performance. So, after the first year or two of riding, you're going to find out that there are specific physical qualities that are holding you back. And this may, differ from rider to rider, but in general, a lot of riders could benefit from getting stronger, and they could benefit from being able to deal with high tension cardio demands, these high tension cardio efforts on the trail. And so there's another thing that you can address is, any weaknesses in your conditioning that can also hold you back. Okay, so like you may need to add strength and or mobility, right? This is another area. If you're really stiff and having trouble moving, well, you're not going to be able to execute your skills as efficiently. A lot of riders struggle with some basic movement patterns that make it really difficult for them to execute basic skills on their bike. And so you need to have some time where you're working on these things. This also, an off season can give your body a break from the repetitive stress that riding puts on it. And it can also give you a mental break and refresh your enthusiasm for riding. And so there are several benefits to having an off season. So how do you fit this in if it's not being forced on this? So it's really a matter of changing your perspective from one season to the next. So I'd like to say up front that riding your bike is the best way to get better at riding your bike. So if you are in a position where you're able to ride year round, that's great. That's optimal. I mean, you have an advantage over people that aren't able to do that. So the more you're able to ride your bike, the better you're going to be able to get at riding your bike. So there's a reason that riders from areas where they can ride year round, so think about like the Australians, New Zealanders, people from Southern California. There's a reason that people go to these places during the quote unquote off season and train, because the more you can ride your mountain bike, the better you're going to get at riding your mountain bike. So again, it's really not a matter of stopping riding. That's not what I would suggest doing. Is you need to like put your bike away and force some sort of off season on yourself. But you do need to change your priorities from one period of the year into the next. And so what would traditionally be looked at as a quote unquote off season is really going to be about focusing more on these improving these other qualities other than riding. So like during the riding season, riding is your priority. Everything that you do is going to be geared around riding as much as you can, and then feeling as good as you can while you're riding. So something like lifting really heavy to get stronger, like that's going to take away from your ability to recover and your ability to ride well. Like spending a bunch of time taking yoga classes or working on mobility and riding less, like that's going to actually, during the riding season, most likely is not going to be the optimal course of action, right? So you're going to prioritize riding, 3+ times a week, and that's going to take away from the time and energy that you're going to be able to put into strength and conditioning and mobility work. And that's just the way it is, right? Like you may just strength train once a week during the riding season, whereas during the off season, you want to reverse these priorities. So this means that you're going to want to make sure that you get your time in with your strength training, your cardio training, and your mobility work, even if that means cutting into your riding time. So again, like during the riding season, you wouldn't want to do this. You would want to prioritize riding, but during the off season, you'd want to flip that, and you're going to prioritize the general physical prep, basically, right? The stuff that you need to do off of your bike. The way that I try to explain it to riders is that you want to look at the things that you need on the trail that you don't use enough on the trail to build to a really high level, right? So this is where things like the strength, the high condition or high tension cardio, your movement quality, like these are things that you need on the trail. But after the first year or two, you really aren't using enough and in the right ways to see improvements from just riding your bike alone. And so you need to be doing something that's going to help you, improve these things. And so that's where, again, like having a period of time during the year where you're focusing on those things. And, you may not ride as much. When you do ride, you may be a little sore, right? You may not be able to ride quite as far or as well as you would during the riding season when you're fresher and riding more. And so, but that's just the priority shift that you're making. During the riding season, so just kind of give you an example of like what these differences might look like, right? Like during the riding season, you may ride 4 days a week, right? And only strength train 1, maybe 2 days a week. And you're not going to be doing any extra conditioning stuff, because riding your bike counts as cardio training and conditioning training. I think, again, a lot of riders get confused with this because they don't count riding their bike as cardio training. And so they're trying to ride their bike and do cardio training. And this really is a recipe for disaster, especially during the riding season. So you really want to focus on using your riding time as your cardio training, and then doing some strength work to keep your strength levels up. And obviously mobility and recovery is something that you should be doing on a regular basis, no matter what the time of the year is. And during the off season, right, then these things will flip. So you may ride 1 or 2 days a week, or 0, right? You may be in a position where you're not able to ride. And so, but you're going to be lifting more, right? You may be lifting 3 or 4 days a week. You're going to be getting in 2-3 days of cardio training. And so again, if you're not able to ride your bike, you may be getting in, like I said, like multiple, 3 or 4 cardio training sessions a week to that are focused on specific aspects of your conditioning that you've identified that I need to work on, right? And so this is how you would flip these things. So you're not really doing anything radically different, right? It's just a matter of doing things a little bit different. So we still always want to do some strength training. We're still doing conditioning and cardio, right? Like during the riding season, just our riding is covering that. During the off season, we're not riding as much, and so it gives us the opportunity to be doing some more specific cardio training. We're always wanting to be doing mobility and recovery work. If we can get on our bike, we want to ride our bike. And so it's just, are we riding 4 times a week or 1 or 2 times a week? And so it's like I said, it's not doing something radically different. I think this where a lot of riders get tripped up is their off-season training program and their in-season training program are almost like they're just radically different, right? Like for example, like if you're strength training during the off-season and then you don't do any strength training during the riding season, right? Like that's a completely different approach to your training plan and training program, rather than having this thread of continuity. Like there's a philosophy that you have. If strength is important, then you want to do it all the time. If it's not important, then don't do it at all, right? So it's making sure that you have these threads of continuity and understanding that sometimes the volume on the riding is turned up more and on the other training is less, and sometimes this is turned up more on the training side and the riding is turned down. And so that's really all an off season boils down to. So I don't even know if that's like really the right term, right? Because it confuses people and makes them think that like, oh, that means that I have to stop riding my bike. And I don't want to stop riding my bike. So why would I want to have an off season? And when that's not really what it means. If you're forced to stop riding your bike, then that's fine. But it's really just a shifting in priorities from one season to the next. And during the riding season, right? Like you're going to be focusing more on training tactics that don't leave you as sore and tired. Just another example I have written down here. So things like isometrics, like low volume, moderate intensity training, like, something that's not going to leave you all sore and beat up. Whereas, in the off season, you're going to be using training tactics like, like a 5-3-1 approach, like the Jim Wendler 5-3-1 program, which is really great for building basic strength. Or, like the Ultimate MTB Workout Program has, higher intensity, higher volume phases in the off season that are going to leave you a little bit more sore and beat up and require more energy to recover from. So, even with the strategies that you're using within the seasons will be a little different, right? Like the exact training programs you're going to use will be a little different. But again, there'll be that similarity. You're still going to be doing strength training. It's just how are you using it and what exactly are you doing? So the mobility and recovery, like I said, something you want to be focusing on all the time. And having an off season, it's part of the bigger picture that it takes to be a better rider over the long term. While you may find that skipping out on the off season training, like not cycling your training if you don't have to, it doesn't seem to matter from one season to the next. What you will find is that over several riding seasons, riders that don't skip that are going to be progressing faster and than riders who aren't, right? So if you're skipping off-season training, again, you may get away with it, and you can get away with it forever, right? But if you really want to maximize your performance, then you need to be using the off-season to help you improve that foundation that you need to become a better rider. So, another way that I look at it, just kind of, to bring this to a conclusion here, is that whatever you're not focusing on is probably the most important thing for you to be doing, right? And so what that means is that as soon as you start doing something, then it becomes less effective, and something that you're not doing potentially becomes more effective. And so this is one of the reasons, like, you need to cycle your training, your strength training plan, right? Like, maybe you need to build strength, and so you get, using a program that focuses on strength. But as soon as you start doing that, well, you're going to be getting less benefits, right? There's a point of diminishing returns. Your body's just not going to respond as well. So at a certain point, what you really need is a higher volume, lower intensity approach. And so you switch after doing a program for 4 to 6 weeks, you switch to something else. And there should be some sort of logical progression that, why am I switching from this to this? And understanding that what am I trying to get from this program, and then what is this program not providing me that I want to switch to next. And it's this changing and understanding of whatever you're not doing starts to become the most important thing that you can do until you start doing it, right? And so if you're riding a lot and you're not doing much strength training, well, strength training is the most important thing that you could be doing more of to help you improve as a rider. And then when you start focusing more on strength training, then riding becomes the most important thing that you could do as a rider. And so again, I know it's a little confusing, but it's just, being able to hold like two opposing ideas in your head at the same time and not go crazy is just part of being a human being in general. But just being able to have a nuanced understanding of these concepts. And so that's the idea, is like during the riding season, you're riding a lot and you're not focused on strength training. And so there does become a point where focusing on strength training more is actually the best thing you could do to help you continue to progress as a rider. But you quickly, once you start focusing on that and you start riding less, there's going to become a point where riding is going to be the most important thing. And so again, it's this cycling of the priorities that is going to lead to the long-term progress. And again, that's where an off-season comes in, even if it's not being forced on you from the weather. So anyways, I hope that makes sense. So if you need a training program to help you get started, I got a bunch of programs at bikejames.com that you can check out. One of my favorites, the MTB Kettlebell Conditioning Program. It's still the only mountain bike specific kettlebell program out there. So if you're into kettlebell training and you're into mountain biking, then you really owe it to yourself to check this program out, because it's the only program that takes kettlebell training principles and mountain bike specific concepts and combines the two. And so you'll really enjoy it. And then also make sure, if you want to stay up to date with the latest training tips from me, then be sure to subscribe to your preferred platform. So if you're watching this video on YouTube, then be sure to subscribe there. If you're listening to this on a podcast channel, then be sure to subscribe to my podcast there. And also to sign up for my newsletter at bikejames.com. That's how to stay up to date with the latest training tips that I'm putting out, and any sort of special deals and things that I'm having on my training programs, or any new things that I come out with. So be sure to check that out and sign up for the newsletter at bikejames.com. So anyways, hopefully you guys have enjoyed this training tip and encourage you to focus on some off-season training if that's not something that you have been doing. And I will talk to everybody next time.